The massive chamber stretched out like a crystal cathedral, its walls pulsing with soft blue light. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy sat in floating pods, their strange forms barely visible through the shimmer of protective force fields. The air hummed with the sound of translation devices working overtime, turning clicks, whistles, and roars into words every species could understand. Ambassador Veldar stood at a speaking podium, his body looking like a walking diamond. Light bounced off his crystal skin as he raised one arm toward the center of the room. His voice came out in musical tones that the machines quickly changed into normal speech. "We have talked about this many times before," Veldar said, his words echoing off the chamber walls. 17 times in just 100 years, someone has asked us to remove the barriers around the Sol system. And 17 times we have said no. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some beings nodded their many heads in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their tentacles or claws tapping against their pods. In the highest seats, where the oldest and wisest council member sat, Elder ZYXera moved slowly inside her special suit. The suit was filled with the poisonous gas she needed to breathe, making her look like a ghost floating in green fog. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had lived for thousands of years. "The young ones did not remember," she said, each word careful and heavy. "They look at the empty space around that yellow star and see only planets waiting to be taken. They do not see the graveyards of fleets that once tried to claim those worlds." Down in the observation area, Captain Brutus of the Vorthak Imperial Navy made a sound of disgust. He was huge even by his species standards, with thick gray skin covered in battle scars. His red eyes glowed as he leaned forward in his seat, his massive hands gripping the rail in front of him. The Vorthak were a young species, at least by galactic standards. They had only joined the Galactic Council 300 years ago, when their warships had finally grown strong enough to demand respect. To Brutus and his people, the rule about staying away from the Sol system seemed like foolish fear shadows. 10,000 years, Brutus whispered to the smaller Vorthak sitting beside him. 10,000 years of silence from that system. The old fools still jump at ghost stories, while perfectly good planets sit empty and unused. His aide, a nervous young officer named Drex, nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Our deep space scanners show no energy signatures, no ship movements, nothing that suggests intelligent life." Brutus had seen the reports himself. The third planet in the Sol system, the one the ancient records called Earth, looked completely dead from space. Their best sensors could barely detect any electrical activity. A few scattered settlements, maybe, probably some primitive survivors living in the ruins of whatever civilization had once existed there. Elder Wyxera's ancient senses somehow picked up their quiet conversation from across the chamber. Her environmental suit turned toward them, and even though they could not see her face through the green gas, both Vorthak warriors felt the weight of her attention. "Captain Brutus," she said, her voice cutting through all other noise in the chamber. "Your people are known throughout the galaxy as great warriors. Surely warriors understand the wisdom of respecting an enemy that once made entire star systems empty themselves in terror." The chamber grew quiet. Every being present turned to look at Brutus, waiting to see how he would respond to being challenged by one of the galaxy's most ancient and respected leaders. Brutus stood up slowly, his massive form casting long shadows across the chamber floor. When he reached his full height, he towered over most of the other beings in the room. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Elder Zuexera, I respect the wisdom of age," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But I also understand that empty worlds serve no purpose sitting unused. If these humans were truly as dangerous as the old stories claim, then where are they now? Where are their great fleets? Where are the weapons that once made civilizations flee in panic?" He spread his arms wide, gesturing toward the chamber's ceiling where stars could be seen through the transparent dome above them. "I see a galaxy full of species cowering from memories and myths. I see valuable resources locked away because of fear. If the humans still existed, if they were still the threat the stories claim, would they not have shown themselves by now? Would they not have responded to our presence in their region of space?" The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Even the translator devices seemed to pause, as if the machines themselves understood the importance of what had just been said. Some of the younger species nodded in agreement. To them, Brutus's words made sense. Why fear a species that had shown no signs of life for 10,000 years? But the older beings, those who remembered the ancient times or had heard the stories from those who lived through them, remained quiet. They remembered tales of human ships that moved faster than light itself, of weapons that could crack planets, of a species so fierce in battle that entire civilizations chose exile over confrontation. Far away from the council chamber, beyond the reach of their censors and debates, Earth continued its slow dance around the sun. Its blue ocean sparkled in the starlight, and white clouds drifted across continents that appeared empty and peaceful. To any observer from space, it looked like a world where nothing important had happened for thousands of years. But deep beneath those quiet continents, in places no galactic scanner had ever detected, other conversations were taking place. And those conversations would soon change everything. Admiral Brutus stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. The ship was called the Subjugator, and it lived up to its name. At over 2 kilometers long, it was one of the largest warships ever built by the Vortak Empire. Its black metal hull was covered with weapon ports, each one capable of destroying entire cities. But the Subjugator was not alone. Spread out in perfect military formation, around it were 299 other Vortak warships. Some were battleships almost as large as the flagship. Others were smaller but faster, built for quick strikes. All of them carried enough firepower to conquer most planets in the galaxy. They floated at the very edge of the Sol system, just outside the ancient boundary that the Galactic Council had marked as forbidden space. From here, their powerful scanners could study the planets ahead without actually entering the zone that had been off-limits for 10,000 years. Lieutenant Drex, the same young officer who had served as Brutus's aide at the council meeting, worked quickly at his station. Numbers and images flowed across his screens as the fleet sensors gathered information about the system ahead. "Admiral," Drex called out, not looking up from his displays. "The scanning is finished. We have complete data on all planets in the system." Brutus walked over to stand behind the lieutenant, his heavy footsteps echoing on the metal deck. "Show me the third planet. Show me Earth." The main viewing screen changed to display a blue and green world spinning slowly in space. It looked peaceful and quiet, with white clouds drifting across continents and oceans. But as the sensors dug deeper, they began to reveal signs of civilization on the surface. "There are cities down there," Drex reported, pointing to bright spots on the continents. "But they look very old-fashioned, sir. The biggest one seemed to be built mostly of stone and metal, very primitive by our standards." Brutus studied the data with growing satisfaction. The human cities showed electrical activity, but not much. There were no massive power plants, no energy shields protecting the population centers, no orbital platforms or space elevators reaching up into the sky. If this was what remained of the species that had once terrorized the galaxy, then they had fallen very far indeed. "Any space defenses?" Brutus asked. "None that we can detect, sir," Drex replied. "No orbital weapons, no hidden bases on the moons, no automated defense systems. If there are any humans left alive down there, they seem to be living like primitives." A communications officer across the bridge suddenly straightened in his chair. "Admiral, we are receiving a message from the Galactic Council. It is marked as urgent." Brutus sighed. "Put it through." The image of Elder ZYXera appeared on the screen, her ancient form still hidden within her environmental suit filled with green gas. Even across the vast distance of space, her voice carried anger and fear. "Admiral Brutus," she said, "you have gone too far. Your fleet must withdraw from Sol space immediately. You do not understand what you are risking." Brutus looked at the message for a moment, then turned to his communications officer. "Send a reply. Tell the old fossil that the age of superstition is over. The Vortak Empire claims this system by right of superior force. We are stronger than myths and ghost stories." The officer nodded and began transmitting the message. Brutus turned back to study the peaceful planet below. After 10,000 years of fear and avoidance, he was about to prove that the mighty humans were nothing more than a faded memory. "Begin the attack," he ordered. At exactly 8 o'clock ship time, the bombardment began. Bright streams of superheated plasma shot down from the Vorthack fleet like spears of light. The weapons were incredibly powerful, each blast capable of melting through the strongest armor or vaporizing entire city blocks. The first targets were the largest population centers: New York, London, Tokyo, Seoul. Each city disappeared in brilliant flashes of fire as the orbital strikes hit their marks. From space, the explosions looked like tiny flowers blooming on the planet's surface. Drop pods followed the bombardment, carrying Vorthack Marines toward the burning ruins. The small ships fell through Earth's atmosphere like metal rain, their heat shields glowing red-hot from friction. Inside each pod, Vorthack soldiers prepared for battle, though they expected little resistance from whatever primitive survivors might still be alive. For 3 days and 3 nights, everything went exactly as Admiral Brutus had planned. His Marines landed near the destroyed cities and set up military bases. Their reports came back regularly, all saying the same thing: minimal resistance, no organized offense, no sign of advanced technology. The few humans and Marines encountered seemed confused and frightened. They ran away when the Vorthack soldiers appeared, hiding in underground tunnels or fleeing into the wilderness. Some tried to fight with primitive weapons: guns that fired metal bullets instead of energy beams, explosives that barely scratched Vorthack armor. "It is almost too easy," Brutus told his officers on the 3rd day. "If this is what remains of the great human threat, then the galaxy has been afraid of shadows for 10,000 years. But on the morning of the 4th day, at exactly 8 o'clock ship time, 72 hours after the bombardment had begun, something changed. The plasma streams that had been hitting their targets perfectly for 3 days suddenly began missing. Not by small amounts, but completely. Weapons that had been accurate to within meters were now striking empty fields and forests instead of cities. At first, Brutus thought there was a technical problem with the targeting systems. But when the technicians checked their equipment, everything appeared to be working normally. The computers said the weapons were hitting their targets. The sensors said the cities were still there, but the explosions were happening in all the wrong places. 3 kilometers below what the Vorthack thought was the burning ruins of Seoul, Lieutenant Commander Mio walked through corridors that gleamed with soft blue light. The walls were made of materials that did not exist anywhere else in the galaxy, and the air hummed with the power of machines that had been waiting in silence for 10,000 years. The command center was enormous, stretching out like an underground cathedral. Hundreds of people worked at stations that looked more like art than technology, their hands moving over controls that responded to thought as much as touch. Above them, massive screens showed everything that was happening on the surface and in space around Earth. Miho was young by human standards, only 35 years old, but he had been trained for this moment since childhood. Like everyone else in the deep cities, he had grown up knowing that someday the galaxy might disturb humanity's long sleep. Now that day had finally come. "Surface deception is holding perfectly," reported Captain Jisu from her station near the center of the room. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her fingers danced across controls that managed the most complex illusion in galactic history. The Vorthack still believe they are fighting primitives. Their sensors show them exactly what we want them to see. Admiral Hyunwoo walked slowly toward the main display, his boots clicking on the smooth floor. He was an old man, his face lined with years of waiting and planning. His gray hair was cut short in military fashion, and his uniform bore no decorations. There had been no wars to fight for 10,000 years, only preparations to make. The central hologram showed Earth as it really was, not the simple world the Vorthack scanners detected. The planet was covered with a network of underground cities, each one larger than anything that existed on the surface. Tunnels connected them like arteries, carrying people and supplies through passages that went deeper than the ocean floors. 10,000 years, Admiral Hyunwoo said quietly, his eyes reflecting the light from the displays. 10,000 years we have maintained the silence. 10,000 years of preparation for this exact moment. He turned to face his staff, men and women who had dedicated their lives to a war that might never come. Now it had finally arrived, and they were ready. "Are all defense systems online?" he asked. Commander Salmon, a woman with silver hair and steady hands, checked her instruments before responding. "Yes, sir. Quantum disruptors are charged and ready. Temporal mines are in position. Gravitic weapons are fully powered. Every system we have built and hidden is now active. The holographic Earth began to rotate slowly, and as it turned, it revealed secrets that would have shocked the entire galaxy. Every mountain contained weapons powerful enough to crack moons. Every seemingly dead satellite in orbit was actually a battle station disguised to look like space junk. The asteroid belt was full of human ships, hidden inside hollowed rocks and waiting for their moment to strike. What the galaxy thought was a dead civilization was actually the most heavily armed and defended system that had ever existed. Humanity had not died or faded away. They had simply gone underground and used their time wisely, building weapons and defenses that were centuries ahead of anything else in known space. Begin Phase 1, Admiral Hyunwoo commanded. Across the Sol system, machines that had been sleeping for millennia suddenly came to life. On Earth, weapons that had been hidden inside mountains began to charge their power cells. In orbit, satellites that looked like broken metal began to unfold into their true shapes. In the asteroid belt, rocks split open to reveal sleek ships that had been waiting in perfect silence. The Vorthak fleet, still confident in their victory, continued to bombard what they thought were human cities. But their weapons were no longer hitting targets. Instead, the plasma blasts were striking empty fields and forests, doing no damage to anything important. Admiral Brutus, standing on the bridge of the subjugator, stared in confusion at his displays. His weapons were firing normally, but somehow they were missing everything they aimed at. Worse, his sensors were beginning to show strange readings. Equipment that had worked perfectly for centuries was suddenly reporting impossible data. "Admiral," one of his officers called out, fear creeping into his voice. "Our sensors are going blind. We're losing contact with half the fleet." Brutus looked at the main screen and felt something cold settle in his stomach. One by one, the icons representing his mighty warships were disappearing from the display. Not destroyed, just gone, as if they had never existed at all. On the ships that were vanishing from sensors, Vorthak crews found themselves trapped in vessels that no longer obeyed their commands. Engines that had never failed suddenly went dead. Weapons that could destroy planets became as useless as scrap metal. Life support systems flickered and died, leaving the crews in darkness and growing cold. The great warships that had terrorized dozens of worlds began falling toward Earth like giant metal tombstones. Their crews, helpless inside, would have become elaborate coffins. Captain Jisoo watched the tactical display as the first human ships revealed themselves. They emerged from asteroids like butterflies coming out of cocoons, their hulls gleaming with materials that seemed to bend light around them. They moved through space with impossible grace, appearing in one place and then suddenly being somewhere else entirely, as if distance meant nothing to them. "Sir," Captain Jisoo reported, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what was happening. "The enemy appears to be trying to surrender. We are receiving multiple transmission requests from the surviving Vorthak ships." Admiral Hyunwoo looked at the display, showing the crippled alien fleet. His expression did not change, and his voice remained steady when he spoke. "They woke us up, Captain. After 10,000 years of peaceful sleep, they chose to disturb our rest. There can be only one response to that." The message traveled faster than light itself, jumping from one quantum relay station to another across the galaxy. Within hours, every major civilization knew what had happened at the edge of the Sol system. The Vorthak 6 fleet, 300 of the most powerful warships ever built, had been completely destroyed. Ambassador Veldar sat in his private office on Altair Prime, staring at the data that his intelligence services had managed to gather. His crystalline body reflected the light from his desk lamp as he studied the recordings that had been transmitted by automated probe ships. These small, hidden observers had been watching the Sol system from a safe distance, and they had captured everything. The battle, if it could even be called that, had lasted only 17 minutes. "Show me the human vessels," Veldar said to his military advisor, a tall being with too many arms who specialized in fleet tactics. The holographic display activated, showing the space around Earth where the Vorthak fleet had been attacking. For the first few minutes of the recording, everything looked normal. The Vorthak ships hung in perfect formation, firing their weapons at the planet below. Then something impossible happened. 7 ships appeared out of nowhere. They did not come from behind asteroids or drop out of faster-than-light travel. They simply materialized in space as if they had always been there. The ships were sleek and beautiful, their hulls seeming to bend the starlight around them. How did they move like that? Veldar asked. His advisor manipulated the controls, slowing down the recording and highlighting the human vessels. We do not know, Ambassador. They appear to slip between dimensions, moving from one location to another without crossing the space in between. Our best scientists cannot explain it. The human ships moved through the Vortex formation like ghosts. They appeared inside groups of enemy vessels, fired weapons that turned entire battleships into clouds of glowing gas, then vanished and reappeared somewhere else. The Vortex ships tried to fight back, but their weapons passed through empty space. The human vessels were never where the enemy expected them to be. 7 ships, Veldar whispered. 7 ships destroyed 300. But the recording showed something even more frightening. As each Vortex vessel died, its crew had time to send out final messages. The recordings of those messages revealed the terror in their voices as they realized they were fighting something beyond their understanding. "Our engines are dead," came one transmission. "Our weapons will not fire. The ship is falling toward the planet, and we cannot stop it." Another voice, full of panic. "They're inside our formation." "How are they inside our formation?" "Our sensors show nothing, but our ships are dying." The advisor fast-forwarded through the recording. The entire Vortex fleet was disabled or destroyed within 17 minutes. Not a single human ship was damaged. Veldar closed his eyes, trying to process what he had seen. The Vortex had been one of the galaxy's strongest military powers. Their ships carried weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop almost any attack. Yet they had been swept aside like children playing with toys. But even that was not the end of the story. Over the following days, reports began flooding in from across Vortex space. Human fleets were appearing at every major Vortex installation throughout their empire. Not the same 7 ships that had destroyed the 6th fleet, but dozens of other vessels, each one as advanced and mysterious as the first. The humans did not send messages demanding surrender. They did not negotiate or make threats. They simply arrived at each Vortex world and began systematically destroying everything the Vortex had built. General Wunbin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Awakening, watching as Vortex Prime's orbital defense stations melted under precisely targeted energy beams. The planet below was the heart of the Vortex Empire, home to over 10 billion people and protected by the most advanced military technology they possessed. It might as well have been defended by paper and sticks. Wunbin was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment, training with weapons and technologies that had been hidden from the galaxy for 10,000 years. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, their movements precise and practiced. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Taehyun from his communication station, "we are receiving surrender offers from 47 different Vortex colonies. They are begging us to stop the attacks." Wunbin did not take his eyes off the main view screen, where another defense platform disappeared in a flash of white light. "Log their messages and continue operations," he said quietly. Surrender was an option before they decided to wake us up. The systematic destruction continued across all 50 star systems that made up the Vortex Empire. Every military base, every space station, every colonial outpost found itself facing human technology that seemed to operate outside the normal laws of physics. Ships that could appear and disappear at will. Weapons that could turn solid matter into pure energy. Defenses that made their vessels completely invisible to enemy sensors. But the humans did not stop with just a Vortex. Any species that had supported the invasion, any government that had provided supplies or encouragement, found human fleets arriving at their borders. The message was clear. Those who helped disturb humanity's sleep would share the consequences. The galaxy watched in growing horror as reports came in from dozens of worlds. Species that had been allies of the Vortex for centuries suddenly found their own fleets disabled and their worlds defenseless. Some tried to flee to the outer rim of the galaxy. Others desperately attempted to prove they had opposed the invasion. Within 6 months, the Vorthak Empire was gone. 50 star systems that had been under their control were now empty of military forces. The Vorthak people still lived, but their government, their military, and their ability to threaten anyone had been completely erased. And throughout it all, the humans said nothing. They completed their work in silence and then vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared. 1 year had passed since the day the Vorthak Empire died, and the galaxy had learned a new kind of silence. Not the comfortable quiet of peaceful times, but the careful hush of children who had been reminded that their parents were sleeping upstairs. The great council chamber on Altair Prime buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 200 different species took their seats. The room looked the same as it had for centuries, with its crystal walls and floating platforms, but everything felt different now. Everyone knew that the real decisions were no longer made at the main council table. President Una of the Terran Federation sat in what had once been called the Observer's Gallery, a section reserved for guests and minor diplomats. She was a woman of perhaps 50 years, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a simple style. Her clothes were plain and practical, nothing like the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by other galactic leaders. But when President Una shifted in her chair, every being in the chamber noticed. When she whispered something to man beside her, conversation stopped across the room. She did not need to sit at the main table because her quiet presence carried more authority than all the ancient protocols and traditions combined. Fleet Admiral Jahun sat next to her, a tablet in his hands, showing reports from across the galaxy. He was younger than the president, maybe 40 years old, with the calm demeanor of someone who had seen impossible things become routine. "The Zolarians have sent a request," Admiral Jahun murmured, his voice so quiet that only President Una could hear him. "They want permission to establish a new trade route through the outer spiral." President Una nodded slightly. "Approved, as long as it does not interfere with shipping in the Outer Rim territories." That was it. No debate, no committee review, no month of negotiations. A decision that would affect the economies of dozens of worlds was made in 2 sentences. Ambassador Veldar, his crystalline body reflecting the chamber's lights, stood up from his position at the main council table. His role had changed dramatically since the Vorthak War. Instead of being one voice among many, he now served as the official liaison between the Galactic Council and humanity. It was not a job he had wanted, but it was one that kept his people safe. "President Una," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber, "the Crystalline Collective has submitted a formal request to expand their territory into some of the former Vorthak sectors. They wish to establish colonies on 3 uninhabited worlds." President Una looked thoughtful for a moment. The Crystallines were one of the few species that had openly opposed the Vorthak invasion from the beginning. They had sent messages to the Galactic Council warning against any attack on the Sol system, and they had refused to provide any support to Admiral Brutus's fleet. "They may claim 3 systems," she said finally, "but no military installations. Civilian colonies only." Ambassador Veldar bowed his head. "I will inform them immediately." And just like that, the fate of entire star systems was decided by a human woman sitting in a chair meant for observers. The council session continued with the usual business that had kept galactic civilization running for thousands of years. Trade disputes between neighboring species, negotiations over mining rights in asteroid fields, requests for assistance with natural disasters on distant worlds. But now every decision, no matter how small, was filtered to the quiet approval or disapproval of the humans. Some species had chosen to flee rather than live under this new reality. Entire civilizations had packed up their populations and moved to the very edge of the galaxy, as far from soul space as they could get. They sent no representatives to council sessions and asked for nothing from the galactic community. Others desperately tried to prove their value to the new order. They offered gifts of technology and resources, volunteered for dangerous missions, and competed to show their loyalty to humanity. It was not a comfortable way to live, but it was better than the alternative. A few species, like Ambassador Veldar's people, had found a middle path. They served as intermediaries and translators, helping to manage the day-to-day business of galactic civilization while the humans remained largely invisible. As the session ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, President Yuna stood and walked to the great observation window that showed the stars beyond Altair Prime's atmosphere. The view was beautiful, but it was not what caught the attention of everyone still in the room. Moving in perfect formation beyond the planet's atmosphere were 7 sleek human starships. They patrolled the space around the Council world like silent guardians, their hulls seeming to bend light around them. The ships were a gentle but unmistakable reminder that the galaxy's new guardians were always watching. Admiral Jehun approached President Yuna as she stood looking out at the stars. "Madam President," he said quietly, "the Deep Fleet has completed its security sweep of the outer territories. Admiral Wunbin requests permission to return to Sol space." President Yuna nodded. "Begin the withdrawal. Leave monitoring stations and automated defense platforms at key positions. The galaxy has learned its lesson." Over the following weeks, human fleets throughout the galaxy began their journey home. They departed as quietly as they had arrived, leaving behind only small monitoring stations that watched and listened but rarely acted. As the last human warship disappeared into faster-than-light travel, a simple message was broadcast on all communication frequencies. It was transmitted in every known language, from the musical tones of the Altarians to the complex chemical signals used by the methane-breathing Outer Rim species. "We return to our rest. Do not make us wake again." The galaxy settled into a quiet even more profound than the one that had existed before the Vorthak War. Civilizations continued their ancient patterns of trade and diplomacy, but they did so with the knowledge that somewhere in the Sol system, humanity slept. And they had learned that humanity's sleep was the galaxy's most precious gift.